Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today we are talking about getting started in Redshift. This lesson is for someone who has never used Redshift before and would like to get the basic introduction on how to get started with it. So let's jump in and see what it's all about. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this absolute beginner's guide to Redshift. Now this video is something a little different that we normally do here at UME Academy, and normally we focus on a little bit more intermediate to advanced lessons on Redshift, but with the new release of Redshift 3.5, I think we're going to have a lot of new users that maybe need some basic information and some information on just kind of how to get around and how to move and everything and how to just even get Redshift working. So that's essentially what this video is. How the hell do you get Redshift just to work, right? How do you set up your first render? We're not going to go too much into detail, but the hope is that you'll have a better understanding of just kind of how to work it, how it thinks and how you should think and how you should maybe train your thinking a little bit differently. Hopefully it'll be, hopefully it'll come pretty easy to you. I think if you are a standard Cinema 4D user, it's going to be a little bit different than you're used to, but if you are a user coming from Octane or Arnold, it's going to be a walk in the park. You're going to be good. Yeah, but this lesson is going to be with the assumption that you have never used a third-party renderer. So how do we do this? What is a third-party renderer? So Redshift is a third-party renderer, and basically because of that, it has its own set of options. It has its own everything. All right, so let's just go ahead and start, and let's get Redshift working. All right, so first thing we need to do is we need to go up to our render settings here. We need to click this, and we need to tell our renderer to be Redshift. Now, of course, you have to have Redshift installed, but you should have this here. Now, two things are going to happen when I hit this. Basically, it's going to switch our renderer to Redshift from standard, and then it is also going to change a lot of buttons. So if we watch over here and here, you're going to see that the buttons change, right? So basically, it's switching into Redshift mode. And it's making our lives easier to an extent. So that is good. Now, with new buttons come new everything. So one thing that I have actually already set up here, but I think it's very important to do because sometimes the Redshift options are very buried in S26, which is one I'm in. I'm also on Redshift 3.5.02, but the buttons are very buried sometimes. So I think it's important also before you start to go to Edit, Preferences, and then let's come here under Render Redshift, and if you're just starting this up, this button will not be clicked, Redshift main menu, but if you watch up here, what's going to happen is it's going to give you a whole nother dialog that says Redshift. Now again, this is all new, so if you're on an older version of Redshift, you might not even have this problem. This used to be here and then they got rid of it. I like to have this on because it makes my life easier, and I think you should too. Now that we're in here, if you have a CPU or a GPU, this is where you would choose this. Okay, so I have a GPU, and of course we all have a CPU, and that's the beauty of 3.5. In 3.5, we can all use Redshift. It's free. The only catch is that's on CPU, and the CPU is slower. But this is where you would select it. So basically, if you don't have a GPU, you're not even going to see this, but you could just turn one on or off for the other. And if you want both to work, which I don't recommend at this stage of this video being recorded, you would choose hybrid rendering. Okay, so for me, I'm just going to leave them both on and keep hybrid rendering off, which means it'll just be using my GPU. Okay, so that's how you select where you are. Now, probably going to do it by default, but just know that it's there. Okay, so the render's working. How do we see it? So we need to go to, again, if you have this menu set up, I highly recommend using it. There's always multiple ways to do it, but you can go to Redshift Render View. Okay, so I'm going to open up Redshift Render View, and we're in Redshift Render View. This is basically, yeah, it's your render view. So a couple things that we see here. We have a bunch of buttons that do a lot of different things. But how do we start it? Well, you guessed it. We hit the play button. Okay, so let's hit the play button. Right down here, you're going to see it's going to tell you what it's doing. So it says it's progressive rendering. And guess what? We are now in Redshift. You've done it. You've arrived. You have made it. So we are in Redshift. Now, what we are in right now is something called progressive rendering. Now, progressive rendering, basically, it keeps throwing passes at it to get it cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. You'll see it's quite fuzzy here. So what it does is basically, yeah, it's trying to make it cleaner and cleaner and cleaner based on what you tell it. Okay, so you can think of it like this. Progressive rendering is for previews only. Okay. Now I keep saying progressive rendering is for this previews only, but what's the other option? Because there's obviously another option. So you have another option for bucket rendering. Now bucket rendering is this icon right here, and bucket rendering is basically your final quality. It's what you want to look like when you render. So I'm going to hit this, and you're going to see that a lot of these noise that's happening in here is going to be reduced. And again, this is all based on our render settings, which I've adjusted slightly for the sake of this video. But you see two things. It takes longer, but it also gets cleaner. So this is where you would check for your final render. Okay, this is like, I'm done. Does it look good? I don't know. But the trade-off is, you're going to see as I move around here, it's very slow. Very slow. You see, it's still calculating everything. Now it's rendering. Whereas if I turn this off, it's going to be much faster. The trade-off is you get noise, but I can deal with that. I like a little mess in life. Okay. A couple other highlights of this window are, you have your play button, right? This is the render to the actual render view, which I never use. So it's up to you if you want to use it, but basically this will kick out a bucket render to like the picture viewer. So if you want to refresh, if for some reason it's stuck, this is like your object buffer. So if you want to, like, if you have like your reflections pass and your spec and all that, it's going to be in here. These are your channels. So if you want to switch from alpha to RGB, green, blue, etc. And then the other highlight would be this one. This is basically your render mode is kind of what it is. So this mode is what they call it, regular mode. And then this mode is clay mode. So basically if we had any textures on this, it would just get rid of your textures, and it's kind of more for lighting. I have a whole video on this one. You can check it out. So that's kind of the highlights of this, right? This is where you're going to live. Now you don't always have to live in this window. There is another option that you can do. So if we go to Redshift and start IPR, okay, so start IPR is going to be inside here. So basically now we're going to be in here. All right, so that's your other option for kind of seeing things. Now for me, I don't find myself using it that much because it's a little clunky sometimes, but it's getting better. So you do have that option should you want to use it. All right, we got that. So what's the next thing to know with Redshift? We know how to see things, but like what's different? So what's different is because, as we talked about at the beginning, it's kind of its own thing, right? Remember all these buttons switched over here and we had to switch it up and stuff. It's because it's its own thing. And with its own thing requires its own special tags and objects and blah, blah, blah. So let's just go ahead, and what I would like to do is I would like to create a light. So I'm just going to come here and I'm going to create an area light. Okay. And when I create an area light, you're going to feel right at home no matter what program you use. It's pretty similar. All right. So it's huge right now. So let's just go ahead and make it bigger. And let's just look at this area light. So in here we have, once again, a lot of things we're familiar with. You can even switch what kind of light it is in here. Let's go ahead and bring the intensity down to like 10 or something. But you have all your normal controls here. What's the color? Are you putting a texture on top of it? What's the size? You know, like how big is it? You have that. And then you also have, even further control. Like, do I want to affect a diffused reflection, etc.? Do I want to cast caustics? You have these options. Turn the shadow off. This is basically where all your options live. They live in here. Do I want to exclude the statue? You know, now it's not gonna light the statue because I've excluded it. So just know that this is pretty similar. Okay, this is something you're gonna be familiar with. A little bonus tip here: if you click this button right here, add target and null, it'll automatically do that for you, which I love. I use it all the time. All right, that's good. So we got that. Lights are easy, same. Next is, all right, so we have objects, but like, do I have any further control for these? Like, can I do anything else with these? And the answer is yes. And this is important because for the most part, Redshift does use extra tags. So let's go ahead and I don't believe, for some reason, again, when you click on this and you click a camera, it doesn't give you a Redshift camera. It just gives you a Redshift standard, which is this ST. Hopefully they'll update that in the future. So let's go ahead up to the Redshift camera and then standard. Okay. Now you'll see what we have here is we have an additional tag. Now this tag is Redshift, right? This is the difference. You see this says ST here, but then we have this tag. So this is where you're gonna come in and you're gonna set all your extra options. If you want depth of field on, this is where you do it. If you want to put on a LUT, if you want to adjust the exposure, the colors, all that stuff is gonna live inside here. If you wanna treat it like a film camera, you have all those options, but it has to be done through this tag. Now these tags can also be accessed in the tags menu, right? If you just lose it here, right? And then there's another tag to be aware of, which is just an object tag. So if you go rendering, tags, rendering tags, and object tag, okay? So in here, this is also special, right? Let me go back and let's just turn on the Redshift. Let's turn on the IPR. All right. Oopsie. And you'll see how much better it looks now too, because if I turn off this light, it just puts on like this crappy default light. But you'll see as soon as we turn this light on, it looks much nicer. So let's go, and this tag, we can say, all right, what is our visibility? I can say, let's put it on the statue actually. I can say, oh, I don't want that statue to be seen. You can do all that kind of stuff. I don't want to cast shadows. Okay, shadows are gone. So that's where you have the control for this. Okay, and you can dive through yourself and see what is all in there. But there's lots of options. In particular, geometry. Have a whole lesson on displacement. You can check that out. So that's one thing to know, is that tags are a big thing. All right, they're like additional features. After that, we have our textures. Now, textures are, in my opinion, probably going to be like the most confusing if you're coming from somewhere else. In particular, if you're coming from standard renderer. So to create a material, because we are in Redshift render mode, you can just go ahead and double click here. And when you double click it, you're going to see it's going to give you an RS material. Okay, so the RS material is great. I love it. It's awesome, but it can also be a little overwhelming. Okay, so in here, you know, for your basic controls, let's go ahead and drag it onto our statue. Okay, and then it's the same thing. Like if I want to make this red, I can just make it red. I have my reflection weight. You have all the controls you need in here, right? Without going into too much detail, but it is different, right? You have a lot more options, which plenty of information out there on it. So you can also put another material on here, which is, let's go to materials, and then let's put a standard material on here. And this is kind of where it's going. And just know that it's going to default to RS material, but the future will probably be RS standard. So you also have this as an option that you can put in here, and it's going to be the future. So maybe just go ahead and start with this in the future, the RS standard. All right, so that's how you add material. But the big thing that you're going to notice that's different about a material is that, man, like where do I pipe in stuff? So with Redshift, you can do stuff in here, but it really likes to work in the node editor. Okay, so the node editor is also new to version 3.5. Now you used to have the node graph. So if you see previous videos, it might look different than this, but the concepts are all the same. So basically you just click on your, double click on your texture tag here under basic node editor. Can you still double click here? No, you used to be able to double click there, but now you can't do it. Node editor, what it's going to do is pipe this up. Okay, and this is also pretty familiar probably if you're a C4D user, because they do have, obviously no controls in there. So this is where you would put in a texture. So let's go ahead and do that. So to access kind of the Redshift area, you hit this plus button, and all this is Redshift everything here. That's all this is. So let's go ahead and search for texture. Okay, let's go ahead and bring in a texture. And I have a texture here that I'm just going to copy and paste to save some time. Now, this is frustrating, but it used to be you had your options here. Now you actually have to go back over to your attributes menu. So I'm going to just click on this. Okay, so when I click on this, it's going to bring this up over here, and I'm just going to paste this into the path. All right, let's put this into our diffuse color. And all of a sudden we have our texture on there. And admittedly, this texture, it's pretty light-handed, I guess you could say, but there's like these kind of like roughness happening in there. All right. And then let's just do one more. Let's do a control copy here, and let's just put a roughness in here. Okay. Let's just paste our roughness. And put this into reflection roughness. All right, so now we have put those through, but we need it to output. So always make sure that you have this set to the output. Now it does it by default, but if for some reason it doesn't, just know that this is kind of an extra step, that it has to be set to your output surface. Now, the biggest thing that's different with Redshift, if you're coming from Cinema 4D, is you do not stack materials the way you used to. All right, in Cinema 4D, you used to just come in here and you used to plop a material on and you'd mix between them, right? That's not how it works in here. In here, what you have to do is you have to actually, let's step back. You see how I'm clicking between here? It goes in between the new materials. You actually have to blend between two materials. So if I just come here and I copy this material and I'm going to make it just like red or something, you have to actually put a blender in here. So if you just search for blend, you need a material blender. Okay, and let's go, I'm going to zip through this, but I'm just trying to give you a concept here. So we'll put this to our base material, and then we'll put this to our material color layer 1. Now, again, I have a whole video on this where you can see the details, but I just want to show you a concept of kind of how you blend it. And then black is basically nothing's going to show, and then red is going to show. Now you see we're not seeing anything, and again, this is why I say the output, because you got to put it to the output. So let's go to our surface output. Now you'll see we're blending between this color, and if I just make this like blue or something, you'll see it's going to, or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's going to blend between the two. Hello, there it goes. It's a little slow today. Yeah, you see it's blending. So just know that stacking materials, totally different, completely different, and yeah, you just have to get used to it, I'm sorry to say. But it's great. It's the way to be. All right, so that's kind of for textures. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just put this, let's go back to here, and let's just put our diffuse color back to our color, and let's just put this back to our surface output. All right, and then I want to make this a little bit brighter, so I'm going to quickly make a dome light. So let's just go ahead, I'm going to kind of zip through this. Let's go ahead and let's make a dome light. And dome lights are HDR lightings or your sky object. And then I have one here that I've copied. So basically, let's go to dome light, and then let's go object, paste it into our texture, and now we have our dome light. And then maybe we'll just like rotate it just a little bit. And you can see Redshift's pretty snappy, even here in this IPR. That's the beauty of Redshift. It's fast, man. It's like real fast. Okay. Cool. All right, so let's say that we got this, we like this, we're happy with it. Let's maybe turn on this just for fun. Got this like mirror in the back. And then let's just say that we like this and it's cool and we want to render it. All right, so if you want to render in Redshift, very easy. All right. Now, of course, this would not be a final render for me, but for demonstration purposes, I think it is. It's what we need for today. All right, so let's go ahead and stop our IPR because it's just crunching on my computer. And let's come in here and let's go to our render settings. And under Redshift, you're going to see this is where we have our quality, right? So if you remember, bucket is our final quality. So they've tried to make it simple. So you have low, medium, high, very high, and custom. Okay, we want to stick in production. Don't worry about RT right now. And then progressive passes, this is also where you would control that. Remember how when I hit the play button, it kept trying to think? This is basically where you would tell it how good of quality you want it to be. For now, we're going to stick with bucket quality to leave it on medium, okay? Because this is just a nice way to be. If you want to go into advanced, you can, and you can start to dial in your settings, and this is where Redshift really shines. But for today's video, we're just going to stick to the basics. And so we like this. It's on medium. And let's go to our save panel, and let's go ahead and say that this is, yeah, whatever. We'll render to the desktop. Okay, and then we are going to we're going to double check over here. Everything looks good. We're going to save, and then our output, all this is the same. Nothing different from your normal output. The only difference is Redshift. So let's go ahead and hit Shift R to render. You're going to see it's going to go through it, and it's going to be rendering in Redshift. That's what it's going to do, because that's what we're telling it to do. All right, so it has cooked out, and congratulations, we have now made our first render in Redshift. And hey, I gotta say, it wasn't that hard, I didn't think. I think it was a pretty simple thing to do. So yeah, just to kind of round it out, basically, what do we learn today? Well, Redshift is similar but different. There's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. The main thing to know is that your texture workflows are going to be different, and that you have to think of it almost as a third-party plugin, right? So you're going to have extra tags, and you're going to kind of be in Redshift world. And once you can get past that, and once you can kind of understand the basics of it, which I hope you have at the end of this video, everything else will just kind of fall into place. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you learned. And if you want to dive deeper, we have so much more information on ume.academy, which you can check out and further your journey. So thanks so much, and I will see you on the next one.